So this is the bootleg gain helper, handmade in Tokyo, Osaka. This is a pedal that I picked up after some forum posts on Pedal Boards of Doom on Facebook. What basically happened was I posted this. That's a pretty low quality post, let's be honest. But I was really curious what this pedal was, and this is legitimately the best picture I had of it. So it was clipped from this picture. This is a magazine scan from Japanese magazine. This is some kind of a rig rundown of the lead guitarist of a Japanese Visual Kei band called Nightmare. This is from their first breakout album period. So the album is called The World Roller. And if you're familiar with the anime Death Note, you probably have heard the opening and ending songs, which are by this band Nightmare. They did a rig rundown for the lead guitarist and the rhythm guitarist, and this is the lead guitarist, Sakito. Down here, you can see there's a few pedals. Some are easy to identify. This is a Hog first generation. This is a Klon Centaur. Snarling Dogs, Wino Wah, Digitech Whammy version 4, Boss GT3. I think this is just an expression pedal. His amp is a VHT Pitbull Ultra Lead, and these are custom guitars, mostly from ESP. Backup amp here, VHT cab. So I did translate this, and I was able to glean some things. For example, I think the cabinet is not using the stock VHT speakers, but instead it's using greenbacks and vintage 30s in an X pattern. And then here, I couldn't really figure out what it was saying with this. Something with the Japanese way of saying Klon Centaur, which is really funny. You can check Pedal Boards of Doom for that one. But yeah, so I posted this in Pedal Boards of Doom. Most people, I'm not going to show any names, but most of the comments were just making fun of how much this looks like SpongeBob and how terrible of a picture it is, and I agree. I did end up posting the original magazine, and much to my surprise, some amazing people in here were able to figure out, people that actually speak Japanese and aren't just using a translate app, were able to figure out what the text says and figure out what this is. And they also, I think, had to use their knowledge of the Japanese guitar market, because this pedal, before this post, I didn't even know this company existed. There's a certain person who figured it out first, and big thanks to him. He can tag himself in this if he wants to. I don't want to post his name unless he wants that. After we figured it out that day, I picked up one of these on eBay, and it shipped a couple days ago. Came with some nice package, party favor kind of things from the shipper in Japan. After posting this, a lot of people were asking me to make a video. The intro was using the bootleg into my Morgan AC20 Deluxe, the Brilliant mode. So it has the bass cut engaged and it has the bright switch engaged, and it's on the EF86 mode, which gives a little more gain. It's a preamp tube. Full power, no cut, which means the cut knob is turned all the way up, by the way. And I was running it into a Torpedo Captor 16 into my audio interface, and then running it through an IR, it's basically a Celestion IR of the same speaker, the G12M that's in the combo, with a Royer R121 and an SM57 on it. No other EQ or anything. In the intro, I turn on the gain booster about halfway through, and the way that gain helper. And the way that I have it set up is the first suggested setting from the manual, which is whenever you turn the master on it all the way up, you're getting unity gain if gain is down to nothing. And then from there, if you turn the gain slightly up, you can add a little bit of boost and a little bit of gain. And the idea behind this use case, according to the manual and my admittedly poor Japanese translation, is that it's not really designed to be a boost pedal per se, nor is it really an overdrive per se, although it can be used as an overdrive that boosts your signal. It doesn't really offer much in the way of clean boost, but it does start with a very flat EQ, unity gain. And the idea is you kind of crank the master all the way up, and then you just turn the gain up a little bit to compensate for things like if you lose a little bit of signal due to a long cable length perhaps, or maybe you're getting a little bit more or less volume from your amp for that reason, or maybe the tubes and the temperature and the humidity, that sort of thing. So what you can do is, start with gain at 0, master at 10, and then if the amp is running a little hotter than your sound that day, you can just turn the master down a little bit. If your amp is running a little quieter than your sound for that day, you can turn the gain up a little bit. Now, obviously, I'm not using it today in two different settings on two different days. So the way that I had it set is that recommended setting with the gain a little bit up and the master at 10. And it just kind of used it as a subtle boost that added a little bit of gain as well for the part of the song where the drums come in. So what I wanted to do, that's basically the pedal. If you turn the gain up more, you can turn the master down to get a more similar volume level. The gain actually goes pretty high. It can get pretty distorted. So you could use it like an overdrive to overdrive a clean amp. The AC20, the way I have it set, it's basically, it already has some overdrive, particularly when you hit chords, but it can have more. So when you hit the front end of the amp with a boost a little bit, it's going to give you a little bit of extra gain from the amp itself, and then also the little bit of extra gain from the gain helper. Now, because I'm running into an amp like that, you're not going to really hear exactly how much gain the amp is adding versus how much gain the pedal is adding. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a looper here. That's going to just play like a really simple chord. I'm going to show you the dry signal, and then I'm going to show you various settings on the bootleg, and we're going to compare that to a clean boost like the EP booster, and also perhaps compare it to RC booster and OCD, which is more of a drive. But since this has so much gain, using the drive on the OCD, you might be able to get an idea of, is this really a boost pedal? Is it an overdrive pedal? Is it something else? And then the last thing I have in the signal chain are these two little homemade pedals I have, and these are just simple volume pots. So what I'm going to do with that is this is all going to be direct so that the amp isn't part of the equation. As I turn up the level on the various pedals, I'm going to be using these volumes to take it back down before it hits my DI. The DI is a BAE 1173, so it's not very neutral. And what I'm going to do is basically correct the output so that it's the same whether you're using this as a boost or not. So you can just see what the sound is of the pedal. We'll do it both ways so you can see how much of a boost you're getting in terms of decibels, but then also what is the sound of the pedal actually. If we just run it straight into the preamp with a lot of boost, it's probably going to overdrive the preamp, and you're going to hear that mostly. So that you don't hear that, we're going to turn down the volume before it hits the preamp, and then you'll get basically just the sound of what the pedal is doing. With the flashback here, it has a loop. I can also turn down the input volume, although I don't think that's going to tell us too much. That would just mean that less of a signal is hitting the pedal. And I tried this yesterday. Basically what happens is, for most pedals, I think, when you turn down the input source, the knobs basically behave like they would if they were at a lower level. So with the gain helper, if you have the gain, say at noon, and then you turn the level of the input down from full to noon, it's going to sound more like the gain booster's gain is somewhere around 8 o'clock. So, right, let's get to that. So I'm going to use Logic for this. With this Carl Martin OctaSwitch, I have it set so the buffer is not on. And the way I'm running this is I have a simple loop in the flashback. And when the level's all the way up, it's about as loud as it is if I were just playing the guitar. And then we can switch in any of these pedals to see what they sound like. The two things at the end are homemade volume controls. So these are basically going to let me, if I turn up the boost on the EP, I can then turn it down here so that it doesn't hit the DI too hard and clip the DI. So we should be able to get the sound of what the EP booster actually sounds like when it's running that hot. And so on and so forth. We can also see how much of a boost it gets by just basically disabling the volume control. And then it's possible it might clip the mic pre, so we might not get the complete picture. If we turn this up, the EP booster says it has 20 decibels of boost, but if it's already running at -11 by the time that it's at unity gain, then, we'd be clipping before we get to 20 dB. So it's not really about how much boost it has, although we can see if it's got at least 11 decibels of boost, which I think probably everything here has. All right, so Let's start with the dry signal. You're going to see the peak here and the RMS here. And so we're peaking at 11. And the RMS is somewhere between 30 and 27. Let's call it 27. Okay, so next we're going to try the EP booster. Just the booster without any volume attenuation yet, and let's see what the peak is. So our original dry signal was peaking at 11. This one's peaking at 9.7. So we can turn that down a bit using one of these volume controls. They're actually set at full right now, but even at full, they already have some attenuation. So we're going to get as close to 11 as we can. All right, so that's peaking at 13.1 with the volume control set up all the way. So it's a little softer, but that's pretty good. You can kind of get the idea there. You get about a 2 decibel boost whenever you don't have any volume control after it, and you get a 1 decibel cut whenever you do have a volume control after it. It's just a 250K potentiometer, so this difference is very minuscule. It's mostly unity gain. So next, let's see what the gain booster, gain helper looks like. So if we take the volume control out and just try the gain helper. Okay, so that gave us 11.4 versus the 11 dry. So again, it's very close. This one's even closer, and it's just a little bit of a cut. So yeah, there's our dry. So 11 versus 11.4. The bootleg, whenever it's in the unity gain setting, is actually a little bit quieter. Next, let's try the RC booster. So right, 8.6. So that's with the volume all the way up. So we could just turn down the RC booster. I don't know if it's necessarily supposed to be a unity gain kind of thing. But let's instead use the volume control and see where that gets us. So gonna turn it down. And just a little bit up. All right, that's pretty close. So RC booster, even if it has no gain, does give you just a slight amount of boost, a couple decibels. And then let's look at what the OCD is going to do. So the OCD, as you can see, the tone's all the way up, the drive's all the way down, the volume's all the way up, and it's in the low mode, which is supposed to be more neutral. So okay, so it peaked right at 11. So it actually is perfectly unity gain if you're going by peaks. The RMS I think is going to be louder because it is adding gain. Let's see what that looks like, RMS. Yeah. Okay, and it peaked a little bit higher. Reset those peaks. All right, so 10.9 versus 11 is really its unity gain in terms of peaks, but it is RMS louder and it has more gain on it for sure. It doesn't sound clean, even with the drive all the way down. So those are the unity gain settings. They're pretty much all the same level And for the RC, we'll put in the volume so that it tames it just a little bit. The EP boosters increased volume by a decibel or so. We can take that out by putting in the second volume. And let's record these signals. So then we're going to look at the EQ of each and see, in addition to what they're doing with the volume, which shouldn't be much at this setting, what are they doing to the EQ profile. So first, let's do dry. Okay. Next, let's do the EP booster. Okay. And then we should do the gain helper. Still one more time, I missed the beginning. Okay, cool. Okay, next the RC booster with the loop 5 volume cut. Okay. Next, we can do the OCD. Yeah, and even just looking at the waveforms, you can really tell that it's adding more compression, which is what gain does. In addition to adding harmonics, gain is going to add upper harmonic content, and it's going to add compression. So yeah, you can see, because if you look at this dry waveform, the way that it decays, it's more extreme, versus the OCD, it doesn't decay nearly as much. So that's what the gain is doing. And if you compare something like the RC booster to the dry signal, it's looking to me like it's adding a little bit of gain as well. The EP booster, on the other hand, it looks pretty much the same. And the gain helper looks the same. So I don't really have a good way right now to test the compression characteristics in a more measurable way, other than just looking at the waveform. But we can use Logic's EQ match to get an idea of what it's doing to the EQ in a really clear way. So what we're going to basically do here is say, I'm a dry signal and I want to become an EP booster. What do I do? So we're going to set the dry to the current, and then we're going to set each of these pedals to the reference one at a time. And that's the EQ curve it gives us is basically going to tell us what the dry signal would have to do to become like the boosted or otherwise processed signal. So here's the dry and the EP booster. I have smoothing off because I don't want to, there's not going to be a lot going on here, so I want to see every detail. Right, so this is basically what the EP booster is doing to the EQ in the flat EQ setting. So right here, there's a crossover. It's giving you a little more bass up to that about, 3.5K range. And then after that, the highs are actually dropping off. They come back, but only above the threshold of human hearing. This is, I would consider this to be more like noise. So yeah, it's actually cutting highs. And what's next? So let's look at what the gain helper does. So we're gonna clear out the reference. That's the EP booster. And then we'll use the gain helper here. One thing about Logic's match EQ is that, how to say, it doesn't, let's say we didn't match the volumes. We did, but if we didn't match the peaks and the RMS and all that, it's not going to just show everything boosted. If it was just a true flat boost, it would look like a flat curve because it's accounting for differences in volume already. And that's why you're always going to have some kind of a crossover right around the 0 line. So the gain helper is kind of the opposite of the EP booster in some sense. The crossover here is right at about 75 hertz. What is it? So I think the low E on a guitar is, yeah, the low E on a guitar is 82 hertz. So if you're using this with a standard tuned guitar, this cut in the bass, you're probably not going to really hear. If you're using, let's say, a bass guitar and it's a 5-string, the low B is down here at 31 hertz. If it's a regular 4-string bass, the low E is around 41 hertz. So if you use this with a bass guitar, the unity gain setting, you actually would hear a little bit of a cut in the bass with the gain helper, but also extended range guitars. But with a standard tuned guitar, this is not really going to apply. What will apply is the rest of it, and you get a slight boost, but it's pretty even all the way up until the limit of human hearing. So even though it's a slight boost in EQ, because it's a unity gain, it's not actually going to sound like a boost. It's just going to sound flat. So the gain helper really does have a very, very flat EQ response for signals within the range of a normal electric guitar, which is pretty cool. The manual, I believe, it tells you a little bit about what the pedal is designed to do. And my understanding is basically you would start off with this setting with the gain all the way down and the master all the way up. And on a good day, you plug in your amp, you don't change any settings, you get a sound that you like. And then let's say you go to a gig. You plug in everything and your amp sounds a little bit different. Maybe you're playing outside and there's more humidity. Maybe that's affecting the way the tubes are running a little bit. Most likely, if you hear a difference at a gig, it's going to have nothing to do with anything like that. It's going to be more like the room you're in. And that's going to make it sound a lot more different than any of this other stuff. That being said, maybe you're running in-ears and you're taking like an IR capture off of your amp. So maybe you've already eliminated a lot of those factors. Maybe you have really good in-ears and you really are able, even at a gig, to hear exactly what your amp sounds like before it hits the room. If that's the case, and for whatever reason the sound is a little bit different, maybe it's the air, maybe it's the power supply, you can use this pedal to make a very slight tweak to your sound in order to get it back to where you wanted it. So let's say your sound sounds a little bit too loud or overdriven at the gig. Maybe the amp is just working a little bit more than it usually does for whatever reason. What you can do is you can turn down the master just a tad on this gain helper, and that'll let you kind of get your signal back to where it was, and then you could use it as an always on thing throughout the whole gig. On the flip side, if your signal is a little bit weaker, you can just boost the gain a little bit and try to get it back to where it was. So that's kind of like I think that's the main use case for this pedal according to the manual. The gain knob has a very large sweep, and with that you will get boost. as you turn this up. So you could use it as a boost, but it's going to not be a clean boost. It's going to add gain too. You can definitely use this as a cut if you just left the gain down and turned the master down to half or something. If for some reason you needed to cut your signal, maybe you like to turn your amp up until it has a nice overdrive, and then you could use this just as a clean signal, engage it, and then you'll get a big cut in your volume, and that'll clean up the amp. Of course, you wouldn't need something like this to do that. All you would need is a passive volume control with a foot switch on it. But this is multi-purpose, so that's one of the things it could do. You can also use it as a drive pedal. So you could turn the gain up more and then turn the master down so that you got pretty much unity gain, and then you'd just be hearing whatever drive this imparts. So a couple ideas there. So let's look at the rest of these EQ matches. So we're going to clear out the gain helper and look at what the RC booster is doing to the EQ, if anything. Okay, so the RC booster with the bass and treble both set at the middle detent, with the volume all the way up and the gain all the way down. Like I said earlier, we still do get a little bit of a volume boost, and looking at the waveform, it looks like it's adding a little bit of gain. What it's doing here shows that we have just a very, very slight increase in bass that tapers off. And then right around here, 4K, you get some particular spikes in the high frequencies at about 5 to 8 decibels. So it's kind of taking these and it's boosting them a little bit. And then from there, similar to the EP booster, it's going to taper off some of the highest highs, and then that just continues into the higher than you can hear range. So this kind of matches with my personal impression of the RC booster, which is it doesn't sound quite as bright or brilliant as like the EP booster, for example, or the gain helper. When it's not supposed to be doing anything, it's still doing that a little bit. I know people say that they think that the RC booster has some sparkle, and I think, they're listening to this perhaps and not as much this. And maybe for me, I was hearing a little bit more of this, and this was not what I honed in on when I was listening to it. We're just looking at the unity gain settings on these two. So once we turn them up, this could all change. Last, let's look at the OCD. See what that's doing. Way different, right? Yeah, so the OCD is not flat, and it's not designed to be, really. I mean, it's, people say it's a transparent overdrive, and I don't know, it might depend on the version. Mine's the version 1.5. But it's still a drive, and so there's really no such thing as an overdrive that has a transparent EQ, because overdrive by its very nature is going to add upper harmonics at least. And the thing about that is upper harmonics depend on what you're playing. So the loop I have, it's a chord. There's a capo on the second fret, but you're getting a low G flat or F sharp, and you're getting, the whole 6-string chord. So that low note, that's at about around 100 hertz. The overdrive is going to add harmonics to that too. So, the first harmonic is going to be at 200 hertz, and then the next at 400, and so on. So even down here, it's going to be adding harmonics. So that's why I think this looks so different than the reference signal. Probably any overdrive is going to look very different. So I think we could have guessed that it was going to do something like this, but it's boosting some frequencies, it's cutting others. It's got a lot of notches in it, so it's definitely adding a different character overall to the sound. You got a big emphasis here. But again, this is kind of below the guitar frequencies. So that's just going to, I guess, be a subharmonic, or it's going to be noise. And then up here, it's doing some more extreme things, but this is also above human hearing, so that doesn't matter too much. All right, so those are our Unity gain settings. Next thing I want to try is, let's just look at what the gain helper does with some different settings. So we're going to record that loop again. This time, let's turn the gain up to around 8 o'clock. This is going to be like the setting I used in the intro. Right around there. So you can hear it boost the volume. But it doesn't really sound like it's got too much gain on it. Let's do another... let's do a peak match. So we'll use this, we'll use the first volume control, and we're going to have to turn it down more than the RC, I'm sure. So we're going to shoot for 11 again. Oh yeah, got to turn down even more. Okay, we'll try that. Okay, that's perfect. So I guess another interesting question would be, how much of a boost are you getting at that setting where you just have the gain around 8 o'clock? So if we take that volume out of the loop, we can see what our peak looks like with the gain helper set that way. So yeah, 1.3. So that's about a 10 decibel boost, even with that small adjustment to the gain knob here. So that's how you would probably use this if you're using it as a boost pedal. Within that range, that's where you can fine tune if you need to make up a little bit of gain for whatever reason. I think if this pedal, if they really went into making that its purpose, then the gain knob should not have nearly this much sweep. Because you just have that small range between off and about 8 o'clock to boost before it starts to get gain. Let's record that and see what it's doing to the EQ, if anything. And I'm going to put in the volume pad again so that we don't hit the DI any harder than the original. Okay, let's pull up match EQ again and see what that's looking like. So we'll clear out the reference, the OCD, and we'll put this one in. Okay, and let's see what that did. So to me, what this looks like is very similar to what the gain helper was doing originally, but just a little bit more. So maybe we can change the current from the dry, and let's set this to the first gain helper. So this is going to tell us if the gain helper at Unity Gain wants to sound like the gain helper with the gain a little bit up, what's it gonna need to do to get there. So you can see basically you have a higher crossover. So this is starting to get into the guitar frequency range. So essentially what this is doing when you turn up the gain to the EQ is it's cutting a little bit of bass. Now if we look at the waveform between with the drive and without, I can't really tell much of a difference in the trailing off. It doesn't seem like it's really adding any gain, or if it is, it's very subtle. Maybe a little bit. If we look at the dry compared to that setting, I can see it does look like it's filled out a little bit more, but it's very subtle. It's nothing like the OCD. It's even, I think it's even less gain than the RC booster at the setting with no gain. So even the EP booster, you don't get, your peaks are kind of squashed here in comparison to the gain helper. So when it comes to this, I think this would actually be a really good boost if you need a boost of about 10 dB or less. It's really doing a great job at boosting that in a way that's not changing the EQ and that's not compressing the signal. So to me, that's pretty impressive. I know it doesn't sound like much difference, but if you really do just want a clean boost, then this seems to do the job pretty well. The only downside is the range of the knob it's really, you don't have much adjustment range in there. Now, to some people that might be a benefit because you can do a lot more with this pedal too. So let's check out what else it can do. Let's turn the gain up to about 9 o'clock. I'm gonna see if I can refocus my camera. So we turned the gain up to 9 o'clock, and we're gonna have to turn the volume down again to not clip the preamp or the DI. So let's see what that looks like. You can see that added about 4 decibels, and it sounds pretty different too. All right, so that's our unity gain. And let's do another recording. Okay. So if we pull up the match EQ again, this time we're going to set the current, let's set it back to the dry signal. And then we're going to use this new clip for the reference. So then this is what has to happen to the dry signal for it to sound like that. So yeah, here we've got a crossover much higher. I'm not sure exactly what note that is on the guitar. Let's see. If the low E is 82 hertz, then 160 is going to be the next E, and 320 is going to be the high E string. So yeah, with this, the crossover is at about the high E. So unless you're playing kind of pretty high up the neck, you're definitely going to have this bass cut here. And then all of this change to the upper harmonics and even the fundamentals of the higher up notes due to that gain that it's adding. It's pretty extreme here, even at that low setting. If we look at the waveform, it's not compressing things as much as the OCD was, but it's compressing it more than anything else so far. So more than the RC booster, and that was more than the EP. So yeah, the difference between 8 o'clock on the gain and 9 o'clock on the gain on this pedal is night and day. It's pretty much like once you get to that point, you're in a different mode of using the pedal. One thing we could try to do is leave the gain where it's at, turn down the master here, and then take off the volume pad to see what turning down the master does, if anything, or if it sounds exactly like this clip. So if we do that, we're going to need to take off that loop, and I'm guessing probably somewhere around here is going to be close-ish. Let's see what that sounds like. Well, I was wrong. That's still a heck of a lot louder. I'm glad we didn't try to um, just use the gain up with the master full and without the volume pad, because that would have clipped our signal. So there's a lot of, if you wanted to use this as a drive and a boost, you can boost the hell out of your amp with this thing. We're not going to try to do that now because we're going to clip. So let's just do this. All right, we need to go even lower. A little bit higher. A little bit lower. All right, that's pretty close. So basically, to get it back to unity gain with even the gain knob at 9 o'clock, you have to turn the master down that far to about 10 o'clock. The rest of it is going to boost your signal. So that's interesting. Let's see what it does for compression and for EQ. All right. Compression characteristics versus when the master was at 10. It looks pretty similar to me. Yeah, it's pretty similar. Maybe just a little bit more compression on this setting, which is interesting because the master is lower. You'd think it would be the other way around with the pedal losing headroom. But that might just be my imagination. They're very close. So EQ match again. Let's see what it's doing. So we've got the current set to the dry sound, and this was the setting with the master all the way up. So let's clear that and set it to this one and see what this looks like. This one, it's different. Having the master up, in addition to adding a ton of volume, it looks like it's also doing something to the EQ, even though the compression didn't really change. So let's do a different thing. Let's say if we want this setting with the master down to sound like the setting with the master up, what would it have to do to the EQ in addition to adding all that boost? Okay, so when you turn the master up, it's giving it more bass until about 175, and then it's cutting highs very gradually until you get to, the really, really highs, and then it's kind of like a logarithmic taper there. So why would it be doing that? I guess it's just the nature of the way it amplifies the volume. When it does that, you just lose some highs. And I think we saw that with the EP booster as well. It did that a bit. It lost some highs. So let's turn up the gain more. Let's do, I don't know. Let's do 12 o'clock. It's going to be a shit ton of gain. And since we got a flatter response with the master lower, I'm going to use that. I'm going to do it that way. Also, at this point, we're kind of seeing what this sounds like as an overdrive versus what it sounds like as a boost. Basically, this shows us that if we do start to use it as a boost with the gain up, then you're gonna lose a little bit of highs. So I'd expect it to do the same with the gain at noon. So that's about our 11. All right. Now it really looks a lot more like the OCD, honestly. If you look at the OCD's waveform and the gain helper with the gain up that high, they're very similar in terms of compression. I would say, especially if you look at it here versus the OCD, this gain helper with the gain at noon has even more gain. Now, that's more gain than the OCD with drive at 0. So the OCD has more gain, I think, overall. Let's do the EQ match for that. So we're going to set the current to the dry signal again. And we'll set the reference to this new one. So this is going to tell us like what kind of EQ characteristics the gain has. So, I mean, it's kind of like the OCD. It's kind of going all over the place. Although I'd say in general, you're losing bass up until here, and then you're actually gaining highs. So it could be interesting to compare this to the OCD. So if we, let's see, if we use the OCD as the current, it's going to tell us what changes would have to happen to the EQ of the OCD to make it sound like the gain helper. And I'm just going to try clearing this out one more time. Make sure that's off. Okay. Because the signal's coming in hotter. I guess that's just, even though we balance the output, it's got a lot higher of an RMS, I guess. Okay. Yeah. So, you can see that the gain of the gain helper has a lot more highs than the gain of the OCD. That's pretty cool. Let's do even more gain. Okay. Let's record that. One more time. All right. So let's look at the compression characteristics first, and we can compare that to our OCD sound again. So even here it had a little more compression than the OCD, and here even more. So let's say that last setting with the gain helper, how does it differ from the newest one? So that's the last one. Here's the newest one. So the two don't differ that much in EQ as we turn up the gain. It kind of just adds more gain. And you'd have to adjust the volume to compensate, but pretty flat from here on out. It looks like it's going to be, but let's just try it at the max setting and see what we get. Okay. So this is with max gain on the gain helper. And with the waveforms, I mean, honestly, they both just look really compressed. I don't really see much difference. Let's do the EQ comparison again. So this time, let's say between the last one and this one, what's it doing, if anything, to the EQ? So that's the last one. This is this one, the most recent, and very, very little. If we go back to the OCD, compared to that type of drive, it definitely has a lot more highs and a little bit less of everything else. And keep in mind, that's with the OCD's tone knob set all the way up. So then this would have been like the before 3 setting. So let's see what that looks like in comparison. Yeah, so even more. So you can see once you get the gain above about 8 o'clock and you start to actually hear gain with this pedal, it also does this basically to the EQ to varying amounts until you get to the full drive. But I think it comes on pretty quickly because this is between like 8 o'clock and full. But if we change the reference from the full to like even just the 3 o'clock, it's still doing that, you know. So that's basically the gain characteristic of this pedal. If you're going to use it as an overdrive, this is what you would see. And then once you get past 3 o'clock, it's not doing too much to the EQ. It's pretty much just adding compression, which is kind of cool. So that's like a 3. That's it all the way up. So that's what this pedal does in a nutshell. Cool. So yeah, next we'll take a look inside of this. Okay, so now the guitar should be muted and we can just take a look at this. So this is the inside. The circuit board is actually at an angle, which is kind of interesting. It is attached to the potentiometers on the front, so that's just the way it's designed. It's kind of cool. It's got a little circuit board there with some tracings and soldering. I don't know a ton about wiring, so I don't think I can tell you what this is doing just by looking at it. But I do see looks like about, let's see, so there are, I don't know, maybe 10 resistors on there, and then the rest of the components, and the box is it's just one of these Hammond cases that you can use to build pedals. It's stamped down in the middle there. The battery connection is, I don't know what make these are, but it's a pretty nice one. The switch is actually a bootleg branded switch, so I don't know if it's doing anything different than a normal switch. This one is actually loose, but the switch feels nice. Let's tighten that up a little bit. It's kind of a different switch than I typically see on a pedal. It's got this kind of unique shape, and it's pretty soft clicking. You don't have to click it very hard, which is good or bad, I suppose. The hardest clicking pedal I have is probably the EP Booster. I think some people like that too. To me, this is a little bit annoyingly difficult to click. Whenever I use this live without a switcher in the past, sometimes I would I'd hit it like that and then it wouldn't turn on. It doesn't matter if you're using it always on, of course, but pretty stout switch on there. It definitely feels durable. The bootleg one, it's just kind of the opposite end of that spectrum. All right, if you've made it this far, congratulations, you're at least as nerdy as I am, and that's saying something. Um, Thank you for watching. You can probably tell from this video that I'm not really an expert at YouTube. I'm learning as I go. I tried to make this as good quality as I could, but there's definitely more I could do in the way of scripting and editing to make it not so long and more interesting, most likely. I use iMovie for this. I can only really do 2 videos at once, but I had 3, the screen share and then the 2 cameras, so I'm probably going to upgrade to Final Cut Pro in the future, and that should let me mix in a little bit more of the third signal, so that it's not always just the screen. If you have any suggestions for me, definitely leave a comment. I know there's a lot to improve, so any tips you have for me, I would love it. If you want to subscribe to my channel, I don't know what I'm going to do with the next one. This has been fun. We'll see what the response is, I guess. So if you're interested in any particular type of thing in the future too, just let me know. I'll see what I can do. And once again, thanks for watching.